Hello, I am Daniel McCann. I am the founder and CEO of Precision AI. We're an artificial intelligence and robotics company that's focused on solving the key food security challenges of the 21st century. Now, I'm here today to talk to you about artificial intelligence, or AI, in agriculture. So a lot of people hear about AI and hear all the buzzwords around AI, but I want to keep this pretty high level, not get too into the weeds. But I kind of want to start by saying what is AI? And when a lot of people think about AI, they think about something like this, right? Or maybe if you're a little bit more pessimistic, maybe you think about something like this. But the reality of the situation is that AI actually isn't very scary. This here is an app that Google just released based on artificial intelligence. And what it does is it actually allows you to take pictures of your skin, and it will see any moles on there, and it'll actually analyze the picture and use artificial intelligence to tell you whether or not you think you should go see a doctor, right? Or the next one, right? As an example, something that we've probably all seen, artificial intelligence is the thing that's behind all the cat videos that get recommended to you on the internet when you actually go on there and surf for different videos. So, there's a lot of innocuous uses for AI, but if you actually think about what AI is, right? AI is just a data processing system that finds patterns in huge volumes of data. And that's it. That's all it is, right? But when paired with robotics, that's when it really becomes powerful. That's when you can use it to automate difficult or menial tasks with a high degree of precision, often a much higher degree of precision than humans are actually capable of processing, right? So a lot of people are a little bit scared of AI, right? There's a lot of misconceptions out there about what AI is. So if you type into Google, what is AI, you can kind of see here all of the different types of things that people have searched. And ironically, it uses AI to predict what else you're going to type in. So if you look at all the predictions down there, you can see that people are a little bit nervous about AI taking over the world. But actually, it's not something to be terribly worried about, right? So here's an example of a bunch of species of different dogs. So to put things in context, a toddler, right, 2 years old, if they see one dog of one species, from that moment onwards, they're actually capable of recognizing what they see as a dog, right? They only need 1 or 2 examples of a dog to know what a dog actually is. For an artificial intelligence to have the same type of processing, it takes 20 million images of different dog species. So there's a huge gap between what a human intelligence is and what an AI is, even at the best of times using today's technology. So it's a fair ways off. But there's one thing that AI is really, really good at. And what that is processing massive volumes of data that human beings can't really process very efficiently, right? So if you think about the farm, it's a perfect example of a huge amount of data, right? There's about 1 million to about 1.5 million wheat plants per acre. And I don't know about you, but I don't have the capacity to go through and look at each individual plant to predict how that plant is doing and then therefore how your crop is going to be doing. Human beings don't have that capability. But machines, on the other hand, right, if you have a drone survey your field, as an example, take pictures of the entire field and use artificial intelligence to process each of those individual pictures, it can actually do interesting things that we just don't have the time or the capacity to do. Right, so as an example, here's a perfect example, right? A drone survey over a field, you can process all of the images and you can actually analyze the images to determine where the moisture, what the moisture content is, or perhaps areas that are drier, areas that might need more nutrients, more fertilizer, maybe places where there's selective weed pressure. These types of things can happen using AI that really can't happen very effectively today, or at least we do it by a best guess basis. So here's one example of a video of artificial intelligence doing something really, really unique and really interesting, right? So a drone flyover a field is capable of producing images for each individual plant. And when run through an artificial intelligence system, it's actually capable of differentiating between what's a weed and what's crop, as an example, right? And in doing so, you can actually make decisions about, you can actually count the number of plants, you can predict yield, you can identify specific weed species in your field or identify where the weed pressure actually is. So you know what chemical potentially that you need to do it and how much chemical to use, and you can use it efficiently, right? You don't need to spray your entire field, perhaps, if you've only got weed pressure in certain areas. So you can actually see where using AI can lead to more informed decisions to help protect your crop and help do new things that you can't currently do today, or at least you do in a very wasteful way. So extrapolating this over the entire possibilities of what can be done in the field, right? You can start to imagine how artificial intelligence can be really transformative. In fact, I personally believe it's one of the most transformative things in agriculture to happen in the last 100 years, right? So looking ahead to this, it's not just, for example, drone images of fields, right? There's all sorts of different things that can happen. You can get satellite images of fields to predict things like drainage. You can get drones to do a little bit more detailed work. You can get soil sensors that are in your soil producing huge volumes of data that you and I could never process on our own. You can get weather stations that are predicting, that are telling you what the weather is and calculating patterns based on that. And you can put sensors on your tractor or sensors on your combine, and you can actually take this glut of data and run it through an artificial intelligence system and get meaningful, actionable information that you can't get any other way. And that's the future of agriculture, and that's how AI is going to transform agriculture. So different types of applications, as I said. The benefits of this are soil health, right? You get more insight into soil health than you currently get without using this because of all the different types of information you can collect and process. You can apply fertilizer in much more efficient ways, saving lots of money and actually getting more impact per ounce of fertilizer that you actually use. Drones are really interesting as well because you can actually get a bird's eye view of the field, and it's the same thing with satellites, and get information on the field as a whole instead of just the perspective that we see when we're looking straight ahead at it. So that can be used to create things like fertilizer maps or spray maps, right? That can be loaded into your sprayer or loaded into your fertilizer spreader, and you can actually control the rate at which you're applying this stuff based on the need as opposed to just doing it for your whole field at a time. The last one is that probably the most interesting application of this is dealing with the biggest problem that a lot of farms have, which is labor shortages. If you're a farm of any size, you probably know how hard it is to find the right help and to keep the right help, especially if you're, if weather's creating a significant time crunch for you. By pairing artificial intelligence with robotics, with machinery, right? You've probably heard of things like self-driving tractors, self-driving combines, right? Things that can automate some of the tasks on the farm that we can't automate today to be able to deal with some of those labor shortages and help the logistics of your farm operate according to the times that it needs to operate at, as well as saving a bunch of money. So I also want to take a bit of a second here to talk about the philosophical importance of AI in agriculture. So one of the things that, just to digress, if let's say our grandparents, right, wanted to build a house, what did they do? Well, what they did is they would grab a hammer and grab some nails and grab some lumber and sit there and hammer away and build their house, right? I call that sort of the tools level of maturity of the industry, where everybody's buying tools, but they have to do the job themselves, right? Eventually, after enough sore thumbs, I realized that my neighbor is twice as good at building a house as I am and can do it twice as fast for about half the cost. So it doesn't really make as much sense for me to try to build that house myself. It makes more sense for me to hire my neighbor, right? Maybe they're a better carpenter. So I hire my neighbor, but at that point, I still have to hire a bunch of different contractors and to be able to go and build my house. That's a services type of model. That's the next level of evolution. But finally, right, the level after that is something called outcomes. And what that is I go to a home builder and I just write a check and I put it in front of them and I buy an outcome. I buy a completed house. And if you've heard a lot about the talks in precision agriculture, what a lot of the big players are doing today is they're trying to sell outcomes to a farmer. So instead of selling you, for example, a sprayer that sits in your shed for 6 months out of the year, they would want to sell you a field clear of weeds, as one example. And the only way to achieve this level of maturity is through artificial intelligence. There's actually no other way to do it. You have to process enough data to be able to know how to be able to apply these types of chemical agents to the field to generate an outcome so that you as the farmer can actually just go and buy field clear weeds and the people already have enough data to know how to deliver that to you without a lot of risk. So it's essential for the future of where the industry is going. Ultimately, at the end of the day, if you look 50 years into the future, right, You've probably seen the movie Interstellar. Some of you may have or may not have. In the future, what ends up happening is the farmers of that time are essentially managers of technology. They're on their land, they still live the same lifestyle, but instead of sitting in that tractor or sitting in that combine, the combines are autonomous. They drive, they do the work for them, and the farmers are responsible for managing those machines using technology while still being connected to their land. And that's sort of where we want to go. So also want to talk a little bit about why artificial intelligence. So if you think, we've talked a little bit about it before, but if you think about agriculture, it's one of those industries in the world that has not yet seen the benefits of automation that a lot of industries have seen, right? We're still in that tools mindset, right? We still buy expensive equipment to do individual jobs, and we still do it ourselves, right? It's not very capital efficient. It's also not very labor efficient, right? We just build better mousetraps. But AI is the game changer. It's the type of thing where you can actually leverage automation. You can leverage data in ways you've never been able to leverage before to optimize every square inch of farmland. So here I've put a quote up, and some of you have probably heard this quote before, but they're predicting that by 2050, the world is going to need 70% more food than it currently needs today. But we have a problem. There's a fixed amount of farmland in the world, right? With a growing population, do the math, right? If we want to feed the world, we need to grow food smarter. We can't continue to do things the inefficient ways we've always done them for the last 100 years. And despite the fact that there have been a lot of innovations in agriculture, they're just better mousetraps. They're just more efficient ways of doing the same thing, right? If we need to produce 70% more food out of the land we have to change the way we approach this problem entirely. AI in the field is inevitable, right? In addition, food production is fundamentally changing. There's a lot of social demand out there. The society is waking up to what we put inside of our bodies, right? And there's a lot of social demand, and it's growing out there right now to reduce chemical application in the field. But 70% of the food that we grow in the world today is predicated on crop protection, is predicated on broadcast application of chemicals. So we also have another problem. Consumers don't want chemical in their food, but we need chemical to produce the food. Otherwise, we can lose up to 70% of our yield. It's a bit of a problem. So, and we're going in the wrong direction. We're actually applying more chemical per capita than actually less chemical per capita. So here's a case study where, for example, a particular broadcast spraying application just indiscriminately sprays everything, and about 80% of that, a lot of people don't realize, is wasted on bare soil. That results in a huge amount of chemical overspend every single year. So here's a solution using autonomy, right? So using drones as an example, you can fly over field and you can actually precisely apply chemical to the weeds and only to the weeds. The chemical doesn't get into the food supply because you're targeting just where the weeds are and you're not spraying absolutely everything. So you reduce the chemical load. And then on top of that, the farmer saves a bunch of money, and there's a lot more, it's a lot more beneficial, right? So these are the types of things that can only happen through use of artificial intelligence. There's no other way to solve these types of problems, right? So going forward to what this might look like in the future, if you have armies of drones going and spraying crops and surveying and locating weeds, maybe sometime in the future, you're going to actually have permanent installations of drones that'll actually survey your fields, right? Equipment that you've never seen before today that is powered by artificial intelligence that can allow you to optimize every square inch of land on your field. But how far away is this really? Well, like I said earlier in the presentation, that the AI is still quite primitive. So this utopia of artificial intelligence running your entire farm is still a ways off. But there's a lot of innovations being made today. Right, there autonomous tractors, as an example, or autonomous farm equipment is starting to become a reality. Right, and probably within the next 10 years, you're going to start seeing a lot of this stuff become more ubiquitous. Sprayers are starting to come out with artificial intelligence systems built into them to help reduce the chemical loads. Right, the stuff is happening and it's happening quick. So just to give you an example, the amount of investment that's going into ag tech is growing exponentially as people realize that this industry needs to become more efficient. And the amount of companies that are actually creating ag tech solutions based on AI are growing exponentially as well. So it's coming quick, right? So just to give you an example here, right, of how fast this change can happen. In 1900, they said, you can look at this and you can say, where's the car? Not only 13 years later, where's the horse, right? So it can happen quick, it can happen fast. So I believe that in as little as 15 years, common pieces of farm equipment like the broadcast sprayer, as one example, might be like the BlackBerry, right? It's still around, but not very common, not very efficient, and there's much better ways of doing things. But we also sometimes need interim steps, right? And this is sort of where we're at today. The technology isn't mature enough yet to get all the way there, but we're seeing these incremental benefits. And as these incremental benefits get more and more adopted on the farm, you're going to see the transformational power of AI find a way to increase yield. It's going to find a way to reduce labor shortages, and it's going to find a way to save money on things like chemical application and fertilizer application. And this is coming, and people are working on this type of stuff today. And that's my presentation. Thank you for watching.
You know, the riders let me play for them for 3 years, and just how to get better on a daily and yearly basis, and I try bringing a lot of that back to the farm. I'm Ben Heenan, and I farm just west of Regina by Grand Coulee. I went to university up in Saskatoon there at the U of S and played for the Huskies for 4 years. After that I played 4 years of pro football, mainly with the Riders here. For me, I feel like, you know, pro football and especially the CFL, that's just, you know, it was a great experience for me, taught me a lot. Had a great time and decided it was kind of my time to move on, and since then I've been farming back here with the family. We've had contact a couple of years back, and it's certainly you know, it's not something you ever want to do. Going around a power pole with an air seeder in the springtime, it was you know, unfortunate event, and you know, fortunately everyone around kind of knew enough and knew what to do at that point. So once it happened, you know, no one went anywhere near the tractor. The operator didn't get out. Just immediately we called Sask Power and they took care of it. After the accident, you know, it's something that certainly crosses your mind. You know, you get everything fixed and you know, everything back to normal, and you get seating again, and you certainly reflect back on worst case scenario. I think that's just kind of human nature. So we're always cautious to start with, and even more so since then. There's a lot worse things that could have happened once contact was made, and wouldn't want to see anything, you know, more serious than that, whether it be an injury or a death. I don't think safety is something you take for granted. I think you approach it the same regardless if you're you know, relatively new to dealing with the power lines, or if you're you know, an older farmer that's been around for a long time. I think it's the same degree of safety that needs to be taken.